Stop trying to forgive them. I know that sounds harsh, maybe even wrong, but if you've spent years trying to forgive a family member who made you question your own reality, who told you things didn't happen when you know they did, I need you to hear this. Forgiveness is not your first step. Reclaiming your truth is. Hi, I'm Marie, and this is Journey Expansion. Today we're going beyond forgiveness to something more powerful. Part 1, the silent sabotage. When I was a toddler, my mother said words to me that I carried around for decades. I wish you were never born. I should have drowned you at birth. Now here's what gaslighting looks like in a family like mine. Those words were said, I heard them, I remember them, but the family narrative? That never happened. Mom was just stressed, you're too sensitive, you're imagining things. Gaslighting isn't always explosive arguments. Sometimes it's quieter than that. It's the slow, steady erosion of your ability to trust yourself. My mother had multiple sclerosis. My father had celiac disease and PTSD from World War II. I grew up in an environment defined by chronic stress and suffering. And when you're a child in that environment, you learn something dangerous. Your perceptions don't matter. What matters is keeping the peace. What matters is not being a burden. At 7 years old, I was sent to a Catholic boarding school. And there, the nuns taught me skills that would shape the rest of my life. They taught me to clean, to care for my mother, and most importantly, they taught me to overlook oddities, to not question, to not trust what I saw. I didn't realize it then, but I was being trained to accept gaslighting as normal. Maybe you recognize this pattern, the phrases that dismiss your experience. That's not what happened. You're being dramatic. Why do you always have to bring up the past? You're the only one who remembers it that way. Each phrase a small cut, and over time, those cuts don't just wound you, they reshape you. You start to wonder, am I crazy? Is my memory broken? Maybe they're right. Maybe I am too sensitive. That confusion, that's not a flaw in you. That's the gaslighting working exactly as it was intended to. Part 2, the forgiveness trap. So what does the world tell you to do about this? Forgive them. Let it go. They're your family. They did the best they could. Holding on to resentment only hurts you. And look, I understand where this comes from. Forgiveness can be healing. I'm not against forgiveness. But here's what I've learned. When forgiveness becomes an obligation, when it's something you're supposed to do before you've even been allowed to acknowledge what happened to you, it becomes another form of silencing. I spent years trying to forgive my family, and you know what happened? I kept seeking out the same dynamics. I married a covert narcissist. His mother was a grandiose narcissist. And I found myself right back in that familiar fog, questioning my reality, wondering if I was the problem. Trying harder and harder to make sense of things that weren't meant to make sense. Because I had skipped a step. I tried to forgive before I ever validated my own experience. I tried to let go of a story I hadn't been allowed to own yet. Forgiveness forced too early doesn't heal. It buries, and what's buried doesn't disappear. It just waits. Part 3, reclaiming your narrative. So what's the step I missed? What's the thing that actually set me free? I stopped asking, how do I forgive them? And I started asking, what is my truth? What is my truth? This is what I call reclaiming your narrative. And it starts with something simple but radical, believing yourself. One of the most powerful tools I've used is journaling. I've kept diaries and journals my entire life, documenting my experiences, writing down what happened. creating what I now think of as my personal truth ledger. For years, those journals felt like a lonely endeavor. The adults in my life didn't care what I had to say, but looking back, those journals saved me. They were proof. Not proof for anyone else, but proof for me. Proof that my memories were real, that my experiences happened, that I wasn't crazy. If you're dealing with family gaslighting, I want you to consider starting your own truth ledger. Write down the incidents, the exact words, and how they made you feel. Not to build a case against anyone, but to build a foundation under yourself, to have something solid to stand on when the fog rolls in. And then, seek validation. Not from the people who gaslit you, they'll never give it, but from a therapist, a trusted friend, a support group, people who can look at your experience and say, yes, that happened, that wasn't okay, and you're not crazy. You don't need your abuser to admit what they did. You don't need them to apologize. You don't need their permission to know your own story. This was a revelation for me. I spent so much of my life wanting my family to acknowledge what happened. To finally say, we were wrong, we hurt you. Well, that acknowledgement never came, and I've made peace with the fact that it never will. But here's what I've discovered. I don't need it anymore. I've given myself what they never could. I validated my own experience. I've reclaimed my own story. Part 4, From Victim to Architect. I'm 67 years old now. I've outlived my parents. I've outlived my grandparents. I've reached a milestone none of them ever saw. And somewhere along the way, I stopped asking the question that haunted me for decades. Why do I feel like I need to justify my existence? I stopped asking because I finally realized I don't owe anyone that justification. Not the family who told me I shouldn't have been born, not the society that told me to forgive and forget, not anyone. My life is my own. My story is my own. And I'm not the victim of that story anymore. I'm the architect. This shift from victim to architect isn't about pretending the past didn't happen. It's about refusing to let the past author your future. The gaslighter wants you to stay confused, wants you to stay dependent on their version of reality. The most powerful thing you can do is to simply stop. Stop trying to make sense of their narrative. Stop trying to earn their validation. Stop waiting for them to change. Accept that you cannot change the gaslighter. You can only change your response to them. For me, that meant setting boundaries. It meant protecting my peace. It meant building relationships with people who honor my reality instead of distorting it. And yes, eventually, it meant something like forgiveness, but a different kind. Not the forced, obligatory forgiveness I'd been told I owed, but a forgiveness that came naturally, after I'd done the real work, after I'd reclaimed my truth, after I'd stopped needing anything from any of them. Call to action. If you're still waiting for permission to trust your own memory, this is it. I'm giving it to you. Your experience was real. Your feelings are valid. You don't have to forgive anyone until you're ready. Maybe that's never, and that's okay too. The path forward isn't about them. It's about you, your truth, your story, your life. Start your truth ledger. Find your people. Set your boundaries. And know that the most radical act of healing isn't forgiving the person who gaslit you. It's finally, fully believing yourself. I'm Marie. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If this resonated with you, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. And if you're not already, consider subscribing. I share videos about growth, healing, and learning to trust yourself again. Keep expanding. I'll see you in the next one.
Thank you for joining this chat. Best wishes to you, always.
Journey expansion, expanding life's possibilities